Good morning. Well, we have a very special morning ahead of us, and no better way to start than with Mario Alonso Puig. Let me tell you a little bit about Mario Alonso. For a long time, Mario has been instrumental in our lives, for many of us, speaking to our soul. Very few people have that ability. And for a long time, many of us, including myself, when we heard the term mindfulness, we thought about yoga, or a cult, or a religion. Many of us never took it very seriously. Now here's a man that not only has the ability to speak to our soul, to speak to our sense of being, to speak to our sense of what we can be, and for the first time, Mario Alonso demystifies for many of us the true meaning of mindfulness, how we can use our minds to become better people and train our minds. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming my good friend, Mario Alonso Puig.
Good morning. Thank you, Paris, for your very kind and gentle presentation. Yesterday, we reviewed a lot of things about mindfulness, the origin of mindfulness. 2,500 years ago, a group of Greek physicians discovered that there was a way of healing which didn't need the use of any kind of drugs or any kind of surgery. They didn't know what was causing that kind of healing. They call it the medical art. Now we know how it works. It activates a part of the nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. We also review some ideas from Lao Tzu from China 2,500 years ago too, who discovered that our mind is a source of problems, that we tend to spend a lot of time in the past worrying about things that happened, regretting decisions that we made and that caused us so many problems. And also, projecting ourselves into the future and worrying about possible, threats, dangers, and also projecting our lack of ability to deal with those possible future challenges. So he said, Lao Tzu said at that time, that it's important to remain in the present. We also review some things about Buddha's discovery. He was a Prince Gautama Siddhartha. He got in touch with human suffering, and he had a very deep intuition that there was something beyond pain. If I hit my hand against this object, this thing, of course I feel pain in my hand. But Buddha was a very insightful human being who thought that there was something on top of that pain, who in some way merged with that pain, increasing the size of the pain, the experience of the pain. He called that kind of pain suffering. And he said that that suffering came from the mind. For 30 years, some pioneers from different fields of science have been studying what happens in ourselves, in our body, in our brain, when we allow our minds to calm down. And some of them were mentors of mine many years ago, and they were really very courageous people. They were very brave, because at that time, as Paris was saying, anything related to meditation or mindfulness was regarded as something obscure, not very clear, belonging to a particular religion, Buddhism. And these pioneers really, out of their courage, out of their determination to find out what was going on, discovered that it was something amazing. It was exactly, or more or less, what a Greek philosopher discovered many, many years ago. So today we are taking a step forward and understanding one of the biggest challenges that we human beings face, which is automatic reaction. So some people, or somebody tells me something and I react in a harsh way. Why are you saying that? And I'm surprised by my own reaction, and I don't like that kind of reaction, because that reaction might have happened with one of my kids, with my significant other, with one of my partners, and I don't like that. Or for instance, if I make a mistake, instead of stopping and doing some research, trying to find out what's the lesson that I can learn from that failure, I start to attack myself, to shame myself, to feel guilty. How stupid you are, Mario. You made the same mistake again and again and again. Of course, there are people who have wounds very deep because they went through very, very tough experiences. And you know, there are a lot of researchers who have been trying, who have been, trying to figure out, to understand how they could apply mindfulness at the time of healing those wounds that we all human beings have. And this is what we are calling, we're going to review today, because I'm very, very happy as today we will practice what is, at least for me, the most beautiful practice approach in mindfulness, which is called loving kindness meditation, or metta. Okay. This is one of the scientists. He's Professor van der Kolk. He's from Holland. He lives in Boston, and he's the leader, he's the director of the trauma center in Boston. And he has a sentence which is extremely profound. He says, "The body keeps the score." And this is quite remarkable, because if we pay attention to what happens to us when we get upset because somebody make a kind of comment or did some kind of action or was not on time or something like that, if we really pay attention, we see that the first reaction comes from the body. So we feel our muscles tightening, we feel our heart bumping very fast, we see some changes in our breathing. And this man has done a lot of research in that field, and he says that all wounds, when we experience wounds, lack of a sense of belonging, lack of a sense of worth, lack of a sense of inner power, that kind of memory, that kind of experience was stored in the body. So the body reacts immediately to what is a provocation. And this is one of the persons who has incorporated mindfulness in his trauma center, which is one of the most remarkable in the world. And he's very sad. I will tell you why he is very sad. Because he has demonstrated, he's a psychiatrist, as I told you before, he has demonstrated that using mindfulness with people who have gone through very, very complicated problems in their lives, people who have been abused, people who have been in wars with the post-traumatic stress disorder, soldiers that returned to the States after having to fight in Iraq and all those places. He has demonstrated that using mindfulness, you can get even better results in some cases, in many cases, than using medication. And he has been trying to publish his results, his findings in some of the most prestigious psychiatric magazines, and none of them wants to publish those articles. This is the reason why he's a little bit sad. He says, well, if this is good for humanity, why don't we let everybody know? It's not that you use it instead of medication, but in some cases it might be even better than medication. So what happens is the following thing. When we are children, we experience some what we call wounds. A wound is, you know, I'm working with my friends at my school, and somebody makes a comment about me, and oh, you're so stupid. And I don't know, but for some reasons at that moment my subconscious mind is extremely open, and that idea enters into my subconscious mind and becomes a belief. And from that point, I start to look for evidences of that. And as you can imagine, if I look for evidences of anything, I will find evidences of everything. So I create that kind of, belief, which is a sense of certainty. I do not challenge that belief. It's not an idea. It's much deeper. And when something happens or somebody reminds me that wound that happened to me many years ago, I respond in an automatic fashion, becoming very fearful, very aggressive, very defensive, and everybody suffers. It's an automatic reaction. So we shouldn't feel guilty about that. But one thing is not to feel guilty, and another thing is not feeling responsible at the time of changing it. Now we know the place where in the brain is that memory of pain, and it's the amygdala. It's in red. You can see in that magnetic resonance image, and it's the amygdala. So the amygdala reacts very fast, but it's not that easy to calm down the amygdala, because it's a kind of pattern, it's a kind of habit that we have been automatically practicing for so many years. And the amygdala belongs to the structures in the brain which work at a subconscious level. It's not like some areas in the cortex of the brain that are the basis of consciousness. The amygdala works at the subconscious level, so it's not that easy to reach. So this is the amygdala. We have an amygdala in both sides. The most important is the right one, because the one that stores most of our pains, many of our wounds. What we know is that the activation of the amygdala creates these kinds of feelings. Anger, remember the reaction, an angry reaction. Bitterness, I will never ever achieve anything in life. Nobody wants me, nobody understands me. Hostility, I become very reactive. Resentment, anxiety, hopelessness, or powerlessness. Why should I try? I will not achieve anything, no matter how hard I try. And the behavior is very clear too. It's about fighting. Of course, we are not in a jungle, so our kind of fighting is mental fighting. He's so stupid. She's so stupid. It's about verbal fighting. What are you telling me that? What did I did to you so that you react in such a way? And we are not aware of that. Or we freeze. We choke. We're unable to react. So the key question is there any way to reach the amygdala without using medication? Of course, there are some medications, anxiolytic medications, and all those things who are at levels, receptor in the neurons of the amygdala. But is there any other way of controlling that hyperreactivity of the amygdala? That was the big question. Many of you are entrepreneurs. Many of you work in companies, and of course, you want your people, you want yourself to be creative. You want to be smart at the time of making decisions. You have to keep a good memory to remember some important facts. You want to be resilient because, there's so much competition in this VUCA world: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. You need to be resilient. So when you make a failure, instead of, looking down to the floor, you take yourself back on track and keep moving forward. And attention, you know how distracted we are. We have to focus on what is really important for our lives, for our family, for our society, for our business. So you can see here, I took it from my book and I'm translated into English because my book is not in English yet. And this is Jorkis and Dodson curve. Those were researchers from Harvard University who discovered a relationship between inner pressure and performance. And as you can see, we stand very well several or certain levels of pressure. In fact, we need certain levels of pressure to perform well, to be creative, to make good decisions, to be attentive, to learn fast, to be resilient. But when we go beyond those levels, the problem is that our attention drops, our intelligence drops, our learning capacity drops, our creativity stops. And Jorkis and Dodson, of course, at that time didn't know the reason for that. They had discovered that, but what's the reason? What happens in the brain that causes such a huge dysfunctional effect? And now we know, because we can use functional magnetic resonance, we know now that the reason is, as we have seen, well, this is the frontal lobe of the brain, and it's the whole brain works as, the brain works as a whole in everything, but there are, like the conductor in our orchestra. The frontal lobe is the conductor of the orchestra. So if you want to be attentive, you want to make good decisions, if you want to learn fast, if you want to find new solutions and all those things, you need very good or very active frontal cortex. But now we know a lot of fascinating things. When the amygdala is activated, the amygdala has an impact in the frontal lobe of the brain. And the amygdala, the activation of the amygdala, when that alarm in the brain goes off, it takes us to that part of the curve, which is the part in which we don't want to be. We don't want to be there because we are not attentive. We don't know what's the most important thing in our day. We are always distracted. We don't make good decisions. We have a lot of problems learning. We are not resilient. We lose that sense of inner power. And now we know how the amygdala does it. The amygdala does it because it produces a change in the prefrontal, in the frontal lobe of the brain. It shifts the blood flow of the brain to other areas, for instance, to the muscles, because the amygdala understands that I am in front of a threat. So why I need so much energy going to my brain? If I'm in front of a lion, I don't need to negotiate. I don't need to be creative. I don't need to make good decisions. I just need to run. And in order to do that, the amygdala has to shift the blood flow to certain parts of the body, like, for instance, the muscles. But this something extremely important. Now you're rotating another slide of the brain, and you see a red spot. It has the size of a pea, guisante, the size of a pea. And it's a very, very important structure in the brain. When the amygdala goes off, it has an impact not only in our ability to be creative, to learn, to make decisions. It has an impact in the body. Remember the people who were yesterday in the first session of mindfulness. Remember what the Greek physicians have discovered. There was something when the patients felt understood, when that emotional bond was created, that had an impact in the way in which they fight their diseases. Now we know why. Because that emotional bonding had an impact in the amygdala. The amygdala, who was very excited or has gone off because of a disease they were fighting against a threat, now because of that feeling of being understood, that feeling of being taken care of, that feeling of being supported had an impact in the amygdala. The amygdala calms down, and the hypothalamus, which is that tiny structure, calms down too. What happens when the hypothalamus is highly activated by the amygdala? It has an impact in the sympathetic nervous system. If you remember at the beginning of this session, what the Greek physicians had discovered was that that kind of emotional bonding, that kind of engagement with the patients had an impact in their healing capacity. And now we know that it was because they activated, of course, without knowing it, the parasympathetic nervous system. What the amygdala does through the hypothalamus is activating the sympathetic nervous system, which is a different one, and is the one that puts the whole body in a sense of alarm. I'm in danger. I'm in front of a threat. So what's the impact of the activation of the sympathetic nervous system when I feel that I am living in a dangerous universe? This is a very amazing movie. The one that I'm going to show you is a very short piece of video. This is a natural killer cell. It belongs to the family of lymphocytes, you know, white cells in the blood. And this is a very remarkable, have a look at the beauty of this structure. It's amazing. It's a cell, and we have millions of them. The reason why it's called natural killer cell is because they kill certain kinds of cells. They are specialized in destroying two types of bad agents, of threats. One are cells who have been infected by viruses. This is the reason why NK cells are very important when you are treating patients with AIDS, because in AIDS, the cells of the body are filled, some cells of the body are filled with this virus, HIV virus. But they are also specialized in attacking malignant cells. And you will see now a short video from Cambridge University in which you see a natural killer, which you will see in green color, attacking malignant cells.
The green green cell you see here is a killer T cell of the immune system, which is attacking the cancerous red and blue cell. You can tell when the killer cell has recognized the cancer cell because the two dots move around and contact the target. The killer cell then spreads out over the cancerous cell.
Now it's in
Passing the
color
beam through a filter
orange.
makes the killer cell look yellow and allows us to really see how it focuses on the cancer cell.
Okay, so one of the interesting things is that when we activate the sympathetic nervous system on a continuous basis, so it means that I feel threatened almost throughout the whole day because I think that I live in a hostile universe. I only pay attention to the news. I think that everything is wrong in the world because everything is polarizing, and I lose track of reality. Of course, there are very painful things going on, but there are also very beautiful things going on. The problem is when the amygdala goes off on a constant basis, when it doesn't shut down, and it activates the sympathetic nervous system, those natural killer cells had a problem at the time of working. They become lazy. So we don't want lazy natural killer cells when we are fighting against a virus infection or against a malignant disease. This is one of the reasons why shutting down the amygdala has become such an important issue. And what you are seeing here at the edge of the chromosomes is what it's called in science telomeres. Telomeres are responsible for keeping the DNA inside the chromosome in a kind of geometrical shape so that the cell can divide into two cells without dying. The interesting thing is that when the amygdala is activated for a long, long time and it doesn't shut down because we, are hijacked by the amygdala, the size of the telomeres is reduced, which is something that, it's not a good piece of news, because we want long telomeres. There is an enzyme which was discovered in 2000, well, it was discovered earlier, but she got the Nobel Prize in 2009, Professor Lisa Blackburn from Australia, although she worked in California. There is an enzyme, telomerase, which repairs the telomere. When the amygdala is activated for too long, because I think I am powerless, I am worthless, I'm hopeless, and all those things, which is a mental thing. It's not the real world. It's a mental thing, which is activating the amygdala with all those feelings, all those physical reactions, fight, fly, freeze, and all those body reactions. The problem is that the level of telomerase goes down. But if you learn how to shut down that unnecessary activation of the amygdala, then the level of the telomerase goes up and the telomeres are repaired. This is one of my dear mentors. He was considered by Time magazine the happiest person in the world. His name is Mathieu Ricard. He is from France. He got his PhD in biology with Jacques Monod, who won the Nobel Prize many, many years ago in genetics, and he discovered the beauty of mindfulness when he was a teenager. So he started going to Nepal every summer during his holidays until he got very involved, and now he had been in Nepal for 40 years. He's one of the abbots of one of the most important monasteries there, and he's the translator to the French of the current 14th Dalai Lama. And he is a very generous man. He's always smiling. He's a great human being. And he has offered himself like a guinea pig for some experiments to see what happens when you practice a kind of meditation, which has the ability to shut down the amygdala when the amygdala activation is not necessary. If I come across a dog who is very aggressive, the amygdala activation is necessary for my own survival. But if I get so anxious in a meeting, in a board meeting, or speaking with my clients, or going home and speaking with my wife, my husband, my children, that's not something that we have to stand. There's another way of living. So he offered himself to be studied by the best researcher in the world in this field, Professor Richard Davidson. And as you see, they put a lot of cables on his head for EEG, and also this is the Weizmann Center. It's in Madison. It's an amazing place. You don't believe how beautiful it is and how gentle the people are there. And some monks after Mathieu, because Mathieu was the first in the world who offered himself as a guinea pig, a lot of monks have gone to this center in order to show to the rest of us what happens when you engage in this kind of meditation, which is what we call, or it's called loving kindness meditation, or metta in Sanskrit. And this is Richard Davidson. Now it has more white hair than dark hair. And I want to show you a very short video, because I will cut in at the middle of it. It's like 2.5 minutes, explaining some of the findings in neurosciences using monks like Mathieu in order to see what happens in the brain. And the findings are breathtaking, because the first person in the whole world who has demonstrated that practicing this kind of meditation, in fact, this meditation that I call you, that this name, loving kindness meditation, or metta, has the capacity to restructure the brain so the amygdala doesn't go off so frequently. Imagine a life with less fear and less rage, less fear and less anger, trying to understand each other in a deeper way, being more calm, taking things in a different way. Now we know that that calmness is not a waste of time. It's a way of going into the curve, Jerkes-Dodson curve, to the side, in which we are more effective, more creative, we learn faster, we are more attentive. So this is a meeting.
One of the great insights of modern neuroscience is plasticity. Our brains change in response to experience and in response to training. Our brains change wittingly or unwittingly. Most of the time, our brains are changing unwittingly. And the invitation in Action for Happiness, the invitation in what His Holiness was conveying, is that actually we can all take more responsibility for our own brains. By cultivating healthy habits of mind, we are learning that we can actually change brain circuits in ways that promote well-being. There are 4 constituents of well-being that have been validated by modern empirical neuroscience. And I'd like to very briefly just go through those 4 constituents. The first has to do with resilience, which is the capacity to recover from adversity. The more quickly we can recover from adversity, the more resilient we are. We can measure that in specific brain systems which turn out to be plastic. And with certain kinds of contemplative training, specific mind training, we can actually change those circuits in our brain to become more resilient. The second component is the flip side of this, which is the capacity to savor positive emotion, to see the positive in the world, to notice the smiles that His Holiness was talking about. And it turns out that this too is subserved by a different circuit in the brain, and certain kinds of practices of the sort that Mathieu will lead us through in just a few minutes can change these very circuits in our brain to sustain higher levels of well-being. The third component of well-being that's been neuroscientifically validated has to do with attention. And it turns out that a wandering mind, to quote a well-known article that was published a number of years ago, a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And if we can cultivate basic qualities of awareness to sustain our attention, we can improve our well-being. And if there's one thing that we've learned from modern neuroscientific research on meditation, it's that attention, as William James said in 1890, attention can be educated. There is absolutely no doubt about it, and this is something that we can learn.
You hear him saying a wandering mind. I think this deserves some explanation. Imagine that you are driving your car, your hands on the steering wheel, and see how much time you are not attentive to the road, to the traffic. You are trapped by your own thinking, by your own feelings, by your own sensations. And because we're so good with an automatic pilot, we don't think that this is something that needs to be trained. The matter of the fact is that the possibility of having an accident when we don't focus on the road is much higher. The other interesting thing, and we talked about yesterday when we talked about the fault network, is that our tendency to be trapped in our thinkings, trapped in our feelings, trapped in our sensations, moving from the past into the future without remaining to the present is associated with a lack of happiness. There's a circuit in the brain, the fault network, who is responsible for that, and it has been shown, especially by Judson Brewer, we spoke about him yesterday, it has been shown that when you practice mindfulness, that the fault network starts to stop and another circuit in the brain starts to work in a different fashion, and that new circuit is associated with better decision, making better decisions, with being more attentive, with being more creative, and so on and so forth. So the findings of Richie Davidson and his amazing team are the following one. We know neuroplasticity. If anybody tells you in any congress, in any meeting that you are too old to learn, that person that is not at all aware of the current findings in neurosciences, and neuroplasticity was discovered many years ago. So no matter how old you are, you will still have that capacity to learn new things, to rewire your brain, to reinvent yourself in case that you decide to do so. So neuroplasticity is one of the things. But remember that our target is the amygdala. We want a kind of approach that allows us to live with less automatic reactions, less anger, less fear, so that we at least explore reality instead of being trapped by our mental world, which is telling us that we are in the midst of a chaos. And what Richie has demonstrated is that when you practice the kind of meditation that we will practice at the end of this session, there is a part in the brain, you remember the frontal lobe when we saw one of the previous slides, but this is a particular part in the frontal lobe. First, it's in the left hemisphere, in the left side of the brain, and it's in the lowest part of the frontal lobe, which is called the orbitofrontal cortex. And it has been shown by him that if you practice this kind of exercise that we will train today for 5 days along 2 months, 5 days every week along 2 months, if they take you and put inside this functional magnetic resonance machine, they will see a thickening of the cortex of that area of the brain. You know, a thickening that can be measured means a big thickening, because it's not that easy. We're talking about tiny neurons. And that structure is extremely important. You know why? Because it's the most important structure who has the ability to control the amygdala. So we're not talking about any brain structure. We're talking about a specific structure which is extremely powerful at the time to control the amygdala. So the amygdala only goes off when it's necessary, not when it's unnecessary. And also he has demonstrated, I took this from my book, it's that the bundle that connects the orbitofrontal cortex to the amygdala increases. It means that now I am telling the amygdala, stop. No time to go off. Time to explore this new business. Time to explore this new context. Time to explore this new relationship. Time to explore this VUCA world without being defensive or being aggressive. Imagine the impact of that. I approach that relationship, I approach that new business possibility, I approach this new context with more intelligence, with more creativity, with more attention, with more capacity to understand what's going on and to learn the important facts. So this is one of the pioneers who have shown to us in a very simple way the beauty of his research, and he is he's sending us a message. We can live in another way. Of course, pain is part of our human nature. If I hit my hand, it will be painful. But the suffering created by the mind is unnecessary. I can have a difficult experience in the morning, but it doesn't have to last throughout the whole day. I don't have to bring my anger and my fear to my home and, vomit that anger, that fear on my kids. And I don't have to vomit that kind of fear or anger against myself, because this is the main source of depression, when we create thoughts against ourselves. So we're going to practice the exercise. Metta is a long one, so I'm just going to use a part of metta. Metta is an exercise. Mindfulness exercise is one of the most beautiful ones. It was designed by Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, Prince Gautama Siddhartha, so the approach is not new. What is new is the science behind the approach. And I will give you a summary of the exercise before starting it. It's an exercise in which you experience compassion. I will explain to you what is compassion. Compassion is, let's imagine that somebody is aggressive with me, verbally. He says, Mario, you will never ever reach anything important. And I feel the pain. Remember, the body keeps the score. Compassion is going beyond that anger. It's understanding the pain beyond the anger. So you do not relate with the anger, you relate with the pain. If you know how to relate with the pain, you will see that the anger starts to slow down, be reduced, and in some cases it disappears. It looks like magic. The difficult thing is to remain calm and present in the face of an aggression. So metta has different areas. The first one starts with ourselves, is the part that we will train today. There are another part with our dear people who really we love in our lives, children, our good friends, or then we start to enlarge that feeling to people who, we have a tough relationship with them, and it's beautiful because Jesus Christ said that many years ago. You have to look at your enemies under a different light. So it's not seeing an enemy; it's seeing somebody who is under pain, and you want at least to offer something to release that pain. The amazing thing is that when you do that, the pain in you also starts to disappear. And in the end, in metta, you enlarge that message of love, of understanding to the whole humanity. So why we will practice self-compassion? Because we are very harsh with ourselves, very, very harsh. There have been a lot of surveys trying to find out what's the real self-esteem that we have, and very, very few people have self-esteem for them. So when we make a mistake, instead of giving a hand to get back on track, we point our finger. You are so stupid, Mario. You make the same mistake again. When will you learn? Will ever you learn? And of course, sometimes we verbalize that message, and it can be here, but many times it goes beyond the consciousness, but we see the effect. So self-compassion, metta, applied to ourselves, is the exercise that we will do today. So I will lead the exercise so that some of you will, I know, if my good friend Emilia is here, she's an expert in this, but if some of you don't have much practice with that, I think it's better if I lead the practice, so at least you have a sense of flavor of what loving kindness is about. So the first thing that I would ask you is to take a comfortable position on your chair, but it's with the legs uncrossed, the arms uncrossed, nothing like a chewing gum or candy in your mouth, because you will experience a deep relaxation. The neck needs to be straight without any strain, sin tirar demasiado. The chin moving a little bit downwards, a little bit, and your hands on your thighs, ideally with the palms up. If you don't feel comfortable with the palms up, you can put them down, but in general it's much more effective, or let's say more effective, if you have the palms up. You can cross your hands, not your arms, not your legs. That's not the position that I have invented. It's a position that has been studied for many years, but it will take a long time to explain why it works this way. So now I would ask from you to allow your eyes to close. and start feeling your body. Feeling your body is not imagining your body. Feeling your body is being attentive to the tactile sensations of your body. From the crown of the head to the tip of the toes. You feel how your face starts to relax. From the forehead to the eyes, around the eyes themselves, the cheek, the jaw, the neck starts to loosen. Let go, relieve all tension that has been accumulated throughout the past days. Allow your shoulders to drop like a coat hanging from a hanger. Allow your spine to relax from the back of the neck to the tailbone. The whole back starts to relax. Now feel your hips and your buttocks and allow the hips and the buttocks to release all tension, to relax. Now your thighs, your knees, your legs, your ankles, your feet, your toes. Now feel your arms getting more and more relaxed, releasing all tension. The elbows relax, the forearms relax, the wrist relaxed, and the fingers relaxed. So you are aware of your body, the whole of your body, and you start to experience a sense of calmness. And if you find that your mind is wandering off and you feel trapped in one of those thoughts or feelings of or sensations, in a friendly way, you don't need to be harsh. You bring back your attention to your body, to the tactile sensations of the whole body. Now allow your attention to go to your belly and feel the softness of your belly and how your belly moves in a gentle way when you inhale and when you exhale. Allow that belly to move like a tide in the ocean. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. And now, bring your attention to your chest. In your chest is your heart. Feel your chest moving like a cradle in which your heart stays and beats. feel the rocking sensation of that cradle. That rocking sensation of your heart in that cradle. And start to get in touch with the deepest part of yourself. With the center of your emotions. With the center of your feelings. Allow any image, any sensation to come to your mind. It's a heart that sometimes is open and tender. It's a heart that other times is close and afraid. It's a heart who can experience the pain and also the joy. It's a heart which can experience the hope and also the despair. It's a heart which can experience the inner power and also that sense of powerlessness. And you keep rocking in that cradle your own heart. That heart of yours who is able to love unconditionally. A heart which is able to forgive. A heart which is able to understand. A heart which is able to be compassionate. A heart that can open up and fill the world with its joy, its courage, its passion, its serenity and its peace. And now, I would ask from you to repeat some sentences. It's what you are going to tell your heart. It's what you are going to share with your heart. So repeat to yourself, I wish my heart is always safe. May my heart always be healthy. May my heart always be in peace. May my heart always experience joy. May always my heart be happy. May my heart experience full awakening. And now from your heart, you feel that something is opening up, and it's filling your whole self from your head to the tip of your toes. And repeat to yourself, may I always be safe. May I always be healthy. May I always be in peace. May I always experience joy in my heart. May I always be happy. May I always experience full awakening. And feel now how this inner joy, how this unconditional love spreads around you to the people who you love, your family, your friends. May you be always safe. May you always be healthy. May you always be in peace. May you always experience joy in your heart. May you always be happy. May you experience full awakening. And now, with that inner sense, which is unique for all of us, experienced in a different way by all of us, this is a deep connection with our heart, with our capacity to love ourselves, to love our friends, even to love those people who are behaving according to their fear. And now we will take 1, 2, or 3 deep breaths, and slowly we start to open our eyes so that we come back to this place fully awake, fully oriented in time and space. We start to open our eyes. We start to open our eyes. And as we have opened our eyes fully, we start to stretch ourselves. Stretch ourselves. Okay. Okay. So the last slides. Let's see if it moves. Let me see. Just a second. You know, Albert Einstein is very well known as a physicist. You know, he won the Nobel Prize in 1925. He was one of the first scientists who started to study quantum physics. And he is also a person quite involved, or he was quite involved in metaphysics. And this is one of the sentences that has touched me in a deeper way. This is: the problem of man is not in the atomic bomb, but in his heart. When we close our heart, when we become frightened human beings, when we don't open up because we feel that if we become vulnerable, our heart will not be able to resist that pain. And metta, loving kindness meditation, is a way of, in some way, understanding that the solution is in the heart. We have seen that when we practice these kind of exercises, what happens with amygdala shuts down, and then we become more creative, more attentive, our body becomes healthier, and we start to see each other under a different light. So it's a way of getting rid of this kind of armor of structure that has been, enclosing our heart. And now our heart can move in a different way. And it's important that we understand that when we transform something within ourselves, we start to send some different messages around us, and people start to respond in a different fashion. But because this works in an unconscious way, we are not aware that we are becoming the source of this positive change around us. So I would like to invite you to keep your faith, to believe in your resources, to believe that at the bottom of all hearts there is beauty. Of course, we do a lot of very terrible things, very painful things, but never, never get rid, at least from my perspective, of the idea that at the core of the human heart is beauty. At the core of the human heart is creativity. At the core of the human heart is entrepreneurship. At the core of the human heart is the capacity to understand each other in a much wider and deeper way.